Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Bring this up here just a little bit. My name is Daniel Cobb, and I'd like to welcome you all today to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Pensacola. We want to take a few moments today to welcome any guests with us today. We are so very glad that you are here. If you would like to receive communications about us, please complete guest cards found on the credenza on the outside. You may return these to the greeters, leave them on the credenza, or place them in the offering basket. We do not have a written order of service, but you each have been provided a document with information about us, as well as a form for any joys and sorrows you may wish to share. Please place any joys or sorrows into the offering basket for collection. These will be read later in the service. When leaving the service, please return the cover document to the basket at the back of the sanctuary. We do have a few announcements today. The announcements go... Okay, today after refreshments, please stay over for our second hour on the welcoming congregation designation in the sanctuary. Now, we do have refreshments today, and I'd like to make special note of this because it has been brought to my attention a rumor of a hot dog wandering the hallways. So please refrain yourself from consuming the hot dog. There will be refreshments later on. Another announcement, Paula has requested some help. She will not be in town the weekend of Earth Day, and we need people. We need people to set up the booth at 9:30 over in Bayview Park and to break it down around 4 and demand the table in 2-hour stints during the day. If you are available for any of this, please see Paula. Come have fun and give away milkweed seeds, because I guess the theme is monarchs? Yes, so we'll be giving away milkweed seeds there. It's going to be fun stuff. Lisa Rawson has requested that we announce that today it has been printed the obituary of her father, Bob Williams. It is scheduled to be printed today in Pensacola News Journal. Lunch Brunch is restarting with a Wednesday, April 20th visit to the fishing hole on Brent. Yes, I believe that restaurant's on Brent Lane. Please make reservations with Hugh Ed Turner today or by phone or by email. Thank you. And now for the chalice lighting. Oh, do you have another announcement, Aaron? Yes.
Sorry, I have the wonderful problem of having 2 trainees in there today, so it took me a second to get out. But this is treasure hat stuff. So as you may have heard in this past Thursday email, the pledge drive results this year left us with some big heavy decisions to make about next year's budget. We had a big shortfall between what we needed and what we got. So we are going to be doing a paper mailing to everyone's house on Monday. So sometime next week, you should get an envelope full of information for your review. Please let me know if you don't get that. And May the 1st, after the service, we will have a town hall meeting so that you can ask your questions, bring your best creative thinking, and sort of get some processing done so that we're not doing all this right before we're voting at the annual meeting, because there's going to be a lot to talk about. So please join us on May the 1st, review that information, and of course, see me if you have any questions or concerns in the meantime. Thanks.
Thank you.
One final announcement I thought. Oh, ma'am?
Second hour announcement?
Yes. Did we not make that one? Today after refreshments, please stay over for our second hour on the welcoming congregation designation in the sanctuary. One final announcement I thought of as I was holding mine in my hand, and I've been guilty of this before. Please go ahead and take this opportunity to silence your cell phones. Okay, and now we will have the chalice lighting. The words for the chalice lighting today come from Reverend Suzelle Lynch, titled, Awaken to the Work. The fire of love burning deep in every human heart calls us to awaken. Awaken to the work of justice. Awaken to the work of compassion. Awaken to the work of community. For in this time of human suffering and exaltation, we are called beyond awakening into action. May the chalice flame we now light guide our hearts in service to a greater good. that holds all living things in the holy embrace. And now we will have some centering music by Bobby Anderson.
Open the door of your hesitant heart. Let the sun shine on all the sleeping shadows. Awaken to this day. This day that offers itself to you and to all with a great extravagance. Awaken to this gift, this beauty, this chance, that we might still begin again and anew, that we might be changed by the in and out of breath, that we might still burst forth like the crocuses, that we might still surprise this earth with a new song, sung together, calling us all in, and then sending us back out, and know it all as a blessing. Come, let us worship together. And now I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we recite the words to our church covenant that will be printed on the screen. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And you may remain standing for our opening hymn. The words will be on the screen. We'll sing it through twice. We give thanks. Thank you all so much, and you may be seated. And I have a story for all of us. And it comes from my favorite book, A Bucket Full of Dreams, by my good friend, Reverend Chris Weiss. And it's called The Cure. And no, that's not a punk rock band here. Or it's not about them. Once upon a time, there was a young girl named Maggie who found out she had a very terrible disease and probably would never be well again. She was, of course, very, very sad, and although she had many friends, all of them were afraid to visit her because they feared they might catch the disease, and I figure that was something we could all relate to after the last couple of years and ongoing. So the little girl sat in her bed all by herself and was very lonely. One day she heard a knock on her door. "Come in," she said, and in walked 3 of her friends. One was a doctor, one was a minister, and one was a magician. Maggie was very glad to see them, for no one else had been brave enough to visit her. "Hello, Maggie," said her friends as they sat down around her bed. "We came to tell you something. Each one of us is going to try to find a cure for your disease." "Yes," said the doctor, "I'm going to go into my laboratory and do experiments until I discover a medicine that will cure your disease." "And I," said the minister, "am going to pray every day that you will be healed of this terrible disease. And when you all get sick, that's what I do." "And I," said the magician, "am going to look through my books of magic until I discover a potion or spell that will rid you of your disease." So Maggie smiled, and she was happy because she saw how much her friends cared for her. That's an important part. She saw how much her friends cared for her. "Thanks," she said. "We're sorry that we can't stay long to visit," said her friends, "but we must rush off and begin our search for a cure. We'll return in 3 days, and surely by then one of us will have found a way to cure your disease." And so her friends went away in search of a cure, and once again Maggie was very lonely. For 3 days, Maggie's friends did everything they could to find a cure for the disease. The doctor worked hard in the laboratory but couldn't discover any medicine that would help cure the little girl. The minister prayed every day and every night that Maggie would be healed of her disease, but the little girl was still sick. The magician looked through all the magic books, but there were no spells or potions that would cure Maggie's disease. All 3 of Maggie's friends were very sad, for they felt that they had failed. After the 3 days were over, the doctor, the minister, and the magician returned to Maggie's house and told her the bad news. "We're sorry," they said, "but we couldn't find a cure. We did our best." And then the 3 friends began to cry. "Don't cry," said Maggie. "Before I was sick, I had many friends, but now they're all afraid to visit me. This disease I have is a terrible one, but it's nothing compared to the loneliness I've felt the last few days. I now know loneliness is the worst disease of all. And I can imagine that every single person in this room has at one time felt very lonely. Right now, the medicine I need most is your friendship. The prayer I need most is for you to simply be with me. And the magic I need most is your love. And so the doctor, the minister, and the magician gathered around the little girl and laid their hands upon her. In the silence that followed, it is said they found the cure. So it's just sometimes being with someone, just sitting with someone, just letting them know that you are there. And it doesn't matter what age you are, from the youngest child to the oldest adult. Having a friend, having someone that you know cares about you is so important. And now our young people are invited to go to their classrooms. And remember, I need you all back up here next week to help me, okay?
This is the point in the service where we will conduct the offering. If you have any donations for the church, that's the only thing that keeps us going, of course. And we also invite you to take this opportunity to place your joys and sorrows in the basket as it gets passed around, and we will be happy to take care of those when they come back up. We have, I suppose this is a joy and a sorrow at the same time, from Jack Wolverton. This is my last week of work as an engineer. He is retiring on Friday, April 15th. It is a very good Friday, he has written, so joy, definite joy, I suppose. Kate and he will be traveling a significant portion of the next 3 months. They will be back to church when available, and they say that you will all be missed.
Just for the traveling.
For safe travels. Mary Lee has a joy to express, a joy for our nation. An appointment as, I cannot remember how to say her name. Thank you, Ketanji Brown Johnson, as an associate judge of the Supreme Court. Laura Keith King has a overjoy to see her old friend Honor Bell visiting us today. And we will light one more candle for all those joys and sorrows which remain in our heart unspoken. And if you would, we will now sing hymn 1002, Comfort Me. I suppose the words, yes, will be shown on the screen.
Please stand. If you're willing and able.
Thank goodness it's here.
You gotta want to stand up and stand.
Yeah, well. There we go.
Thank you so much. Obviously, this service is all about how we as a congregation comfort one another, walk with one another, dance with one another, sing with one another, help one another get through so much. And I always need help from my friends, and Daniel's been a big help this morning. And it's always good if I come to the pulpit with my sermon. This is where we are, right? At the sermon time? Thank you. Yes, right here on my list. Comfort me, and then the sermon. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about comforting and being friends and how church community helps us. Some years ago, a friend of mine who was studying to be a Unitarian Universalist minister came back from a class that she took, or a course that she took, with a huge question that she was grappling with, and she thought maybe I would know the answer because I was the minister. And as someone aspiring to ministry, she had been seriously shaken by the story of a classmate in this course that she was taking on faith development, which is, what we call our religious education curriculum and for all ages. The children's program is called Faith Development, and it's lifespan faith development. The classmate, it turned out, was not actually a seminarian. She was already an ordained minister, and her name was Kathy, and she had come to the class, she told the people, seeking solace. And as I tell you Kathy's story, I know that you will agree it is one of the greatest tragedies. It makes me shake almost to think about it. Her vibrant and beautiful daughter, who lived and worked in another city, had been murdered in her own home. And Kathy's devastation over this unimaginable loss understandably shook my friend and all the rest of the people in the class who were hearing the story. But another thing that really shook them was that this was an ordained minister, not a seminarian like the rest of them, and yet it seemed that this minister was unable to find solace, because that's what she came looking for, in her Unitarian Universalist religion. And if this minister could not find solace in her Unitarian Universalist religion, what did this mean for my friend studying to be a minister and others in this class who were aspiring to provide a ministry that would offer consolation to parishioners in the face of loss and grief? And as my friend continued to talk about Kathy, I learned that as time passed, Kathy continued to do the community outreach ministry with the homeless that was a part of her work through her church. So this is the part of the story that my friend, as she described it. Kathy had made friends among the homeless people that she met, and she was wandering the street one evening when one of her homeless friends approached her and said, "You look too sad, Miss Kathy. I want you to have something." And he handed her a small crucifix. "My mama gave this to me," he said, "but it looks like you need it more than I do. When I'm feeling down and out," he said, "I go to St. Michael's. Maybe you want to try that too." Now, Kathy had never been Catholic and wasn't even raised Christian. So she puzzled over the crucifix that was lying in the palm of her hand, and even as she found herself walking to the Catholic church that was several blocks away. When she got there, it was Ash Wednesday, the first day of Lent, and the Catholic priests were leading the congregation through the stages of the cross. Hardly aware of what she was doing, Kathy stumbled along with the crowd until she found herself kneeling in front of the fourth station. For those of you who have been raised in this tradition, that's the one where Jesus, on his way to Golgotha, meets his mother. "There I was," said Kathy, looking at another woman whose child had been murdered. The church was full of people kneeling before Mary and grieving their pain and her pain, Mary's pain. Suddenly, Kathy began to weep. My friend and her other classmates were deeply moved by the story, as you can imagine, and then they began to share their own stories, many of whom were having a difficult time finding solace. And while this sharing was moving, it was also disconcerting. My friend had found Unitarian Universalism to be a place of comfort and solace at a very difficult time in her life. And so the stories that she heard caused her to wonder if this comfort, this solace that she felt she got from the church would hold up under some unimaginable, horrible thing that might happen? And if not, how could she trust herself to minister to others in such situations? So the question to me was, what solace can Unitarian Universalism offer us when the ground of our being is ripped out from under us? A theologian, Paul Tillich, calls the ground of our being God. And what I heard my friend ask was, what can Unitarian Universalism offer when God, or that which we trust to keep us grounded, evaporates? Pretty big question. Caused me to do a lot of thinking. What do we do when all we have are questions and none of the answers that people give us make sense in the light of our experience? Which happens, Sometimes many people go through that. What can a religion that professes to have more questions than answers do when someone desperately wants to understand why? But probably the reason I'm faithful to a religion that appears to have no answers is because over and over I've seen where people who thought they had the answers discovered that those answers failed them in a moment of crisis. A belief in a loving, just, and forgiving God makes sense when our lives are progressing the way we hoped and planned for. It's when the unthinkable happens and all that we stacked our beliefs, our expectations, our hopes on is suddenly jerked out from under us that we find ourselves unable to reconcile previously held beliefs with our experience. When what we believed prior to the moment of crisis fails us, we may find ourselves not only in a state of extreme grief, but also disoriented and desperately grasping for something to hang on to. At those times, it's not external answers that save us, but internal resources that we depend on. Those inner resources are developed over time as we grapple with the questions of the meaning of the events in our lives. They are developed and strengthened within religious community, even as they are reflected upon and reinforced in times of solitude. We had a little conversation about this in our Soul Matters theme circle last week. Dolly Berthelot told a story about her own time of reflection upon prolonged illness and isolation during her youth that influenced tremendously how she understands and makes meaning in her life now. Trying to make sense of and find reasons for suffering, pain, and evil is what often brings people to liberal religion. Something unanticipated happens in their lives, and all of a sudden, the framework they counted on no longer supports their need. Or maybe it wasn't a crisis, maybe it was a long process of coming to accept that the religion they were raised in is lacking in the face of their experience. The traditional answers lose power and meaning, yet a person yearns for some way to understand how life can be of value when the suffering seems so unfair. I'm reminded that every Sunday when we gather, someone may walk in the door with that very question and that need. And that's why choosing what we do here on Sunday morning matters so much. Whether we found our way here in search of answers or have chosen to remain here since birth or childhood, I think what we share is a need to discover for ourselves the answers that make sense to us. Our religion is not what it ought to be, wrote Eliza Cabot, unless our conscience bears testimony that the religious views we hold are the result of faithful inquiry. If answers to life's questions of meaning have been handed to us and not, as Unitarian minister Ralph Waldo Emerson put it, been dealt from a life passed through the fire of thought, there's a good chance They will not serve us when despair looms. My friend's class was on faith development, which would underlie any theology and relates to how we are oriented religiously and spiritually. Our ability to have faith, to place our trust in something, is a developmental process. A faith community has a responsibility to offer the opportunities for that lifespan faith development. In our Unitarian Universalist congregations, it takes some work to develop a faith. We are not spoon-fed any answers. Each of us is responsible for our work in the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Not everyone who finds their way to a Unitarian Universalist church decides to stay. It makes sense that if people arrive here and search for something in particular, they may stay long enough to discover that what they're looking for is not here. That's okay. If we try to be everything to everybody, we end up being nothing. But what's not okay is to ignore the responsibility to make available the opportunities for faith development, for finding meaning and purpose. There are a lot of people who will tell you that when they finally found a UU church, they knew they were home. And I'm always glad to see a big sign like the one we have out front, making it a little easier for people to find a Unitarian Universalist church. Easier for those who would be saved by liberal religion. While I was trying to answer the question, what does Unitarian Universalism have to offer, I realized that's not really the question. The question is not, what does UU have to offer? It is what we can create together as a religious community that invites people into a search for meaning and purpose in life and offers comfort in those times when life just seems too overwhelming, or when life threatens our sense of integrity, meaning our sense of being put together well enough to resist what might challenge our very will to survive, or our energy to sort through the potential for finding purpose or meaning. If we cannot offer answers to your questions about why things happen as they do, we can offer a community of people who care about whether or not you are able to find answers that make sense to you. We can offer a community that creates opportunities for religious growth and learning and support during times of crisis. Reverend Bill Murray, who I've spoken about before, reminds us that finding meaning and purpose in life is critical to our ability to handle crises. One way we can do that is to save the world as well as savor it. And I think I mentioned this once recently. This thought comes from E.B. White and is expressed in these words by the Unitarian Universalist minister Richard Gilbert. What's that you say? To save, one must serve. To savor, one must save. The one will not stand without the other. No, we find meaning not in answers, but in saving and serving. Murray explains that a second way of finding meaning and purpose is to recognize that the liberal faith perspective is part of a larger context of human history, or even the entire cosmic process. Images, stories, symbols, all these help us make sense of our lives. Myths give us a context for meaning and ethics. Those of you who have studied Joseph Campbell are familiar with these ideas. Well, he's not the only one, but a lot of people were really into Joseph Campbell at one time, and he had a lot of important things to say about the importance of myth. Myths and stories tap into universal themes and archetypes, the story of the whole human family, from which we draw deeper understanding of our own circumstances. For me, this speaks of the meaning of the phrase, "We belong to one another." We are accountable and responsible to one another for building a better world. We bring meaning to our lives as we contribute to the psychosocial evolution of life. That part's a quote from Murray. We are motivated by an ethic of love. This is our interdependent web. And finally, according to Murray, there are other ways to find meaning as well. We find meaning through loving relationships, through personal growth, through goals and purposes that give our lives meaning that transcends ourself, and through commitment and involvement in causes that contribute to human betterment. And if it's not in here, many of us find this kind of meaning and purpose in our lives and solace from the beauty of nature and from interacting with all of the creatures and the beauty that exists. Religious community plays a role by providing continual reinforcement of our beliefs and values. And as Murray sums up in his book, religious communities point the way to meaningful living and reinforce our belief in life's meaningfulness by means of songs, stories, myths, symbols, rituals, sermons, and readings, celebrations of the passages of life, and through the love, friendship, and support of others who share our lives and experiences in a meaningful way. The liberal religious community provides these kinds of support through worship services, support and growth groups, one-to-one relationships, and social service groups. There are many ways for us to contribute to the ongoing universal evolutionary process of life enlargement and enrichment. A meaningful life requires more than having a theology. Once we find meaning, what we believe must be integrated into who we are and how we act in the world. All of this so clearly describes Kathy, as I see from the story I heard. After her daughter's death, Kathy's work with the homeless continued. She remained firm in her commitment to work to end the death penalty, even in the case of her own daughter's killer. In that story, I do not hear about a woman who crumbled under the weight of tragedy. I hear the story of a woman who tapped into her inner resources and struggled to continue to find meaning and purpose in her life. She came to that class to be with people that she knew she could relate to and to learn about faith development. She was working on developing her inner resources and her own faith in the face of unspeakable tragedy. She stayed connected with the things that gave her life meaning before the tragic event. And deep within her was a story that resonated with the age-old story of another mother whose child had been taken from her under similar circumstances. Kathy's spirit of seeking and searching and her belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person enabled her to accept the gift from the man who was homeless, both the cross, a symbol of his faith, and the suggestion that she might also find something of value at St. Michael's. Kathy had to be open to that possibility to go there that day. And that openness is a cornerstone of our liberal faith. And in going there, she was met with the realization that even in her darkest moment, she was not alone. If Kathy hasn't found the solace that she is seeking yet, I feel confident that in time she will, because she knows the way by heart. May it be so for all of us. May it stay with you, this awakening, this beautiful grasp of who you truly are, never alone, always worthy, graced with a unique gift that the world surely needs. And if you lose it, if it slips through your busy fingers or is drowned out by the noise of the world, remember, you can always retrieve it here in this tender temple of equally forgetful friends who are always ready to sing you back to yourselves. Amen. May we go in peace.